Setting boundaries is one of the most loving things you can do for yourself and for others. It's a form of respect that says, I value my life, my health, and my relationships enough to protect them. Will it be easy? Absolutely not. Will people test their boundaries? Guaranteed. Will some people be upset with you having standards? Without a doubt. But here's what I know for sure. Welcome to the Kindness Extremist Podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. I've spoken to tens of thousands of people all over the world about the importance of kindness. And I am obsessed with how we can bring more kindness into our daily lives and restore balance to a deeply unbalanced world. Every episode, I'll give you 3 practical strategies to create a kinder world, and I'll do it in 30 minutes or less. No fluff, just valuable, actionable content that you can implement in your life immediately after listening to help you actively create a kinder world. There's no time to waste. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to episode 25 of the Kindness Extremist Podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. And this week, I'm going to tackle the most requested topic from my listeners. Can you guess what it is? Okay, that's dumb. Obviously, you know what it is because you clicked on this episode. Yes, it's boundaries. I touched on this topic briefly in episode 10 of this podcast, but we're going to go so much deeper in this episode. Specifically, I'm going to dive into protecting what matters most to you so you can show up as your best, most authentic self for the people and for the causes that deserve your energy. And yes, setting boundaries is the most compassionate thing that you can do, both for yourself and for everyone around you. As a lifelong recovering people pleaser, setting boundaries has been some of the deepest work that I've had to do in both my personal and professional life. On one hand, I felt enormous guilt that consumed me for days whenever I said no to other people. But on the other hand, when I said yes, when I really needed to say no, I was consumed with resentment towards them and shame toward myself for not creating the necessary boundaries. Thankfully, I've learned a lot since those days, and I'm excited to share my favorite strategies that will not only help you to set effective boundaries, but will actually help you to become more loving and present in the process. So, if you're ready, my friend, let's get on with the business of setting effective boundaries and ideally reclaiming your life. Before we talk about boundaries, we need to cover an often overlooked prerequisite: priorities. Let me ask you a question that might sting a little. When's the last time you truly knew without a doubt what your top 5 priorities were? Not what you think they should be, not what your boss thinks they should be, or your family or society tells you what they should be, but what you have consciously chosen as your priorities. If you're like most people, you probably can't even answer that question clearly, and there's a reason for that. We live in a culture that glorifies busyness and treats saying yes to everything as a badge of honor. But here's what I've learned the hard way in my old age. If everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. Let me tell you about something that happened to me several years ago. I was working with a boss who expected everyone to live and breathe the company 24/7. She would routinely send emails at 10 p.m. and expect responses within the hour. She'd schedule urgent meetings during lunch breaks and then act shocked, like literally shocked, when people mentioned that they had personal commitments at that time. For months, I played the game. I wanted to be seen as dedicated, as someone who would go above and beyond. But slowly, I started missing dinner with my family and I was exhausted all the time. My wife would joke that she felt like a single parent, even though I lived in the same house. The breaking point came when my boss asked me to stay late on a night when I promised my daughter that I would help her with the school project. As I called home and listened to her disappointed little voice on the phone when I called to cancel, something had to change. That's when I got really, really serious about my priorities. Here's what I know for sure. Your priorities are either chosen by you or they're chosen for you by default. There's no middle ground on this, fam. When you don't have clear priorities, you become reactive instead of proactive. You say yes to things that don't matter and no to the things that do. You spend your precious energy on other people's urgent requests while your own important goals collect dust. So, how do you determine your real priorities? It starts with getting completely honest about what truly matters to you, not what you think should matter. Let me share my own priorities as an example. These are the top 10 things that keep me grounded, peaceful, happy, and effective. 1, being a fully present father to my 2 daughters, including being there for every volleyball game, track meet, parent-teacher conference, and any other important event in their lives. 2, sleeping at least 6 hours a night. Preferably 8 or 9, but no less than 6. 3, actively taking care of my physical health through exercise and smart food choices. 4, staying in close contact with my mom and my friends. 5, spending quality time with my wife that doesn't include staring at glowing screens, meaning no work laptop or cell phone. 6, having frequent downtime to rest and recharge so I can be my best for my family, my friends, and my colleagues. 7, engaging in lifelong learning through reading, listening to podcasts, attending seminars, and watching TED Talks. 8, maintaining a deep spiritual connection through daily meditation and mindfulness practices so I can remain at peace. 9, being able to express my creativity through writing, public speaking, and my other hobbies. And 10, having fun by hanging out with friends, going to sporting events, or on date nights with my wife. These priorities, to be clear, my friend, they aren't random. They're carefully chosen over years. I wrote them all down because they align with my values and my vision for the life that I want to live. When I allow work or anything else to consistently interfere with these priorities, I fall short of my potential as a human being. More importantly, I become someone I don't even recognize, irritable, resentful, and disconnected from what makes life truly meaningful. Here's what I want you to understand. Your priorities are not suggestions. They're not nice to haves. They're the non-negotiables that define who you are and who you want to become. But here's where it gets tricky. Once you identify your priorities, you'll quickly realize that the world gives nary a damn about your priorities. Your boss won't care that your family dinner is important to you when she's asking you to work late. Your friend won't care that you need 8 hours of sleep when she's asking you to help her move out of her apartment at 6 a.m. on a Saturday. This is exactly why boundaries exist, to protect your priorities from a world that will gladly consume all of your time, energy, and attention if you let it. Think of priorities as your North Star. They guide every decision that you make. When someone asks you to do something, you can quickly assess, does this align with my priorities or does it compete with them? Does this move me closer to the life that I want or further away from it? Without clear priorities, you're like a ship without a compass, blown around by every wind and current. With clear priorities, though, you become the captain of your own life. So here's your first practical takeaway of the episode. This week, I want you to complete what I call a priority clarity exercise. Take 15 minutes, if that's how long it's going to take you for real, and write down your top 5 priorities. Yeah, I had 10 because I've been doing this for a while. Just start with 5. The 5 things that if you honored them consistently would make you feel fulfilled and aligned with who you want to be. Don't overthink this. Your first instincts are usually correct. These might include relationships, health, career growth, creativity, spirituality, or contributing to causes that you care about. Once you have your 5 priorities, ask yourself this crucial question. What would my life look like 6 months from now if I consistently honored these priorities? Like for real, really visualize it. How would you feel? What would change? Also, please resist the urge to say, no one's going to honor my priorities. You know what? You're absolutely right if you don't try. One thing is for sure, no one is going to fight for your priorities besides you. So why would you quit on this before you even start? This exercise is critical because it'll give you the clarity and motivation you'll need to start setting boundaries that actually matter. And speaking of which, now that you understand why priorities are the foundation of everything when it comes to this boundary work, let's talk about the different type of boundaries that exist to protect those priorities. If our priorities are how we would like to focus our energy, our attention, and our time, our boundaries are the limits that we put in place to protect those priorities. Think of it like this. A life without boundaries is like living in a house with a permanently wide open front door. Doing so would leave you and your loved ones at heightened risk for vandalism, theft, assault, and potentially much worse. Of course, not everyone has questionable motives when they see your wide open door, but you are kidding yourself if you think that no one has ill motives when they see your open door. Your door is the first line of protection for your home, just as your boundaries are the first line of defense for your priorities. Most people think boundaries are just about saying no to extra work or declining social invitations, but the reality is boundaries show up in multiple areas of our lives, and understanding these different types is crucial for comprehensive self-protection. Let me walk you through the 3 main boundaries that every person needs to understand and implement. And as I break this down for you, please don't worry about being perfect at this, because I promise I'm a work in progress in all 3 of these boundary areas. We're going through this together, my friend. I'll tell you what's worked for me and hopefully it's helpful. So the first are time boundaries. These protect your most precious resource, your time. Time boundaries include doing your best to set work hours and sticking to them, limiting how much time you spend with energy-draining people, and ensuring you have adequate time for rest, connection, and activities that actually nourish you. Here's a personal example. I don't take work calls past 5 p.m. so that I can be fully present with my wife and daughters when they're home from work and school, respectively. This is not negotiable. It's a time boundary that protects my priority of being fully in the moment with the people who I love the most. Another time boundary is, additionally, I do my best to be in bed no later than 10 p.m. every night, ideally earlier, but no later than that. Also, another time boundary is I tend to be a workaholic, so I make a point to never eat my lunch at my desk. It's a daily reminder for me to get up, move my body, and get some fresh air. These might seem like small things, but they add up to a life where work doesn't consume every waking moment of my time. Secondly, there are emotional boundaries. These protect your emotional energy and well-being. Emotional boundaries mean not taking responsibility for other people's feelings, not getting pulled into unnecessary drama, and maintaining a healthy separation between your emotions and those of others. This is particularly challenging for empaths and highly sensitive people like yours truly. I feel things very deeply, which can be a beautiful gift, but it also means I can become easily overwhelmed by others' emotions if I don't maintain strong emotional boundaries. An emotional boundary might sound something like this. I'm not willing to discuss office gossip. If you have a concern about a colleague, I'd encourage you to talk to them directly. See how simple that is? This aligns with my priority of doing everything in my power to live a peaceful life. One thing is for sure, our emotional energy is finite, and we shouldn't waste an ounce of it on mindless drama that's going to steal our peace. The third are digital boundaries. In our hyper-connected world, these have become absolutely essential. Digital boundaries include turning off notifications during certain hours, taking breaks from social media, and not feeling obligated to respond immediately to every message. Oh, and also protecting your private time from the constant intrusion of technology. For example, when I'm on vacation, whether it's 1 day or 2 weeks, I don't answer work-related emails or calls, ever. My out-of-office messages on my email become a thing of legend. I don't care who's trying to contact me. I devote practically 300 days each year to my work. My vacation time is mine. I also leave my work-related devices at home when I'm on extended vacation because sometimes just the act of reading an email from certain people is enough to send my mood into a tailspin. I'm sure you can relate to this. So I eliminate the temptation entirely. Also, this would be a good time to mention that these boundary types often overlap and reinforce each other. For instance, putting your phone on Do Not Disturb after 8 p.m. is both a digital and a time boundary. See where I'm going with this? Here's where people get stuck. They think that boundaries are about controlling other people. They're not. Boundaries are about controlling yourself, your responses, your time, your energy, and your choices. You can't control whether your boss asks you to work late, but you can control whether you say yes. You can't control whether someone tries to dump their emotional problems on you, but you can control whether you engage. Also, you can't control whether people respect your boundaries, but you can control how you respond when they don't. And here's the part that might surprise you. Healthy boundaries actually improve your relationships rather than harming them. When you maintain clear boundaries, you show up more fully and more genuinely in your interactions. You're not resentful because you're not overextended. You're not bitter because you're not saying yes to things that violate your values. People might initially resist your boundaries. Let's be real. You know what's going to happen, especially if they've grown accustomed to you not having any. But the people who truly care about you will respect your boundaries, even if they don't understand them. If nothing else, remember this. The people who will get upset with you enforcing your boundaries are the people who benefited from you not having any boundaries in the first place. Real talk. So here's your second practical takeaway of the episode. This week, I want you to conduct what I call a boundary audit. Look at each area of your life, your work, family, friendships, health, personal time, and ask yourself, where do I feel resentful, overwhelmed, or taken advantage of? These negative emotions are often signals that a boundary has been crossed or needs to be established. Then, for each area where you identified a problem, determine which type of boundary would address it. Time, emotional, or digital. Write down one specific boundary you need to implement in each area. For example, I will not check work email after 7 p.m., which is a digital boundary. Or I will not discuss my work drama with my mom during our weekly calls. That's an emotional boundary. Start with just one boundary, just one from your list, and focus on implementing it consistently this week. Small, consistent actions lead to big changes over time. Once you know what boundaries you need, the next challenge is actually enforcing them when they're tested. And trust me, my friend, they will be tested. More on this in part 3. Hey, fellow kindness extremists, it's me, Shola. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, if you're mowing what I'm growing, if you're smelling what I'm stepping in. Okay, I'll stop. If you're enjoying what you're listening to so far, I would love it if you would take a moment to hit the subscribe button and leave a rating and a review. Those incredibly kind acts go so far in helping me to reach as many people as possible who will join the movement to actively create a kinder world. I appreciate you so much, my friend. Okay, let's get back to the episode. All right, my friend, we've covered why priorities matter and the different types of boundaries that exist. Now comes the part that separates the talkers from the real ones who are about that boundary life, and that's enforcing your boundaries when they're tested. And make no mistake, they will be tested. People will push back, they'll guilt trip you, and try to convince you that your boundaries are unreasonable. This is exactly why you need a clear and actionable strategy. And that strategy is my LINE framework, LINE. Listen, inspect, know, and enforce. This isn't theory. I've used this framework countless times in my personal and professional life, and it works, but only if you're willing to use it consistently, even when it's uncomfortable. So let me break down each step. L is for listen. When someone asks you to do something that might violate your boundaries, resist the urge to immediately get defensive or interrupt. This is not the time to let your emotions take control. Listen fully, don't interrupt, check the emotion that might be bubbling up inside of you. It's tempting to skip this step, especially when you can already sense that what's being asked will cross a boundary, but don't do it. Here's why this step is so crucial. Saying no becomes so much more difficult if you're interrupting, getting defensive, or showing in your face that you're already annoyed. Stay calm, check your emotions, and listen completely. Secondly, the I is for inspect. Once you understand exactly what's being asked of you, this is where you determine whether it violates one of your established boundaries. So to be clear, this step requires that you already know what your boundaries are, which is why the priority setting work that we did in part 1 of this episode is so important. Remember, if you don't know what your priorities are, you can't clarify your boundaries. And if you haven't clarified your boundaries, you can't effectively inspect whether they've been violated or not. So ask yourself this very simple question. Does this request align with my priorities or compete with them? Does saying yes mean saying no to something more important? If your boundary has been violated, move to the next step. If it hasn't, you can choose to say yes or no based on other factors that make sense for you. But at least you're now making a conscious choice about it. The N is for no. If you determine that your boundary has been violated, it's time to say no. But here's the key. You need to say no with confidence and without over-explaining or apologizing for having boundaries. Your no doesn't need to be elaborate. In fact, the simpler the better. Here are some examples that I love. I won't be able to do that. Or, that doesn't work for me. Or, I'm not available then. Or, I can't take that on right now. Notice that none of these responses include lengthy justifications or apologies. You don't need to convince anyone that your boundaries are reasonable. They're your boundaries, and that's reason enough. The E is for enforce, and this is where most people fail. They set the boundaries, they communicate them clearly, but then they don't enforce them when those boundaries are tested. Now, before I dive into enforcement, let me be very real with you about something important that you might be thinking. Just because you have priorities and boundaries doesn't mean they'll always be honored. Sometimes life happens. Sometimes you're going to have to stay late at work because of a genuine emergency in the office. Sometimes you're going to have to help a friend move on your rest day because they really need you. Sometimes you're going to have to attend that family gathering even when you'd rather be at home chilling. That's all a part of being a responsible adult in relationships and in life. The key is that these should be exceptions, not the rule. Your boundaries aren't meant to make you inflexible or unreasonable. They're meant to protect what matters most so that when you do make exceptions, it's a conscious choice rather than a default pattern. Okay, with that being said, remember this. Enforcement means that you're prepared to follow through with consequences when someone continues to violate your boundaries after you've made those boundaries clear. Let me share a personal example of how I use the LINE framework. In my previous job, I had a colleague from another department, who I'll call Sean, who would routinely walk into my office, shut the door behind him and say, "Hey, do you have a minute? I really need to vent." Now, mind you, Sean wasn't even really asking because, as mentioned, the dude was already in my office with the door closed. What made this tricky for me is that he was higher up in the workplace hierarchy than I was, so I thought it would have been a bad move for me politically to enforce a boundary with him. But after this going on for quite a while and Sean frequently draining an hour or more of my work time on a nearly daily basis, it started causing additional problems for me. Since I was losing precious work time to listen to his drama, I had to start taking my work home to get caught up, which meant interrupted evenings with my family, lost sleep, and growing resentment, like real resentment. After one particularly difficult evening at home, I realized that something needed to change. Here's how I use the line framework with Sean. And again, the L is for listen. So the next time Sean walked in my office uninvited, I gave myself 2 minutes, like an internal clock in my head, to listen fully to what he needed without getting annoyed or showing my frustration. Secondly, and again, the I is for inspect. After 2 minutes passed in my head, I was like, all right, this is past 2 minutes, and he was still bumping his gums about some random drama brewing in his department. I quickly determined that this violated my boundary around protecting my peace and not having my work bleed into my family time, both of which were two of my top priorities. And third, again, the N is for no. So I interrupted him and said, hey man, I know this feels urgent to you, but I have a ton of work that needs to get done this afternoon. If this is a genuine emergency, I'd be happy to help, but if not, I really need to get back to work. Fourth, and most important, again, the E is for enforce. So after I set a boundary with him, Sean was clearly shocked because I never checked him in the past when he started spilling his drama all over me. Almost annoyed, he said, so when will you be free to talk then? I can come back around 3 p.m. I did not take the bait. I said, sorry, man. Like I said, I have a ton of work that I need to get done, so I'm not available to chat about non-urgent stuff. Predictably, Sean wasn't thrilled and he turned around and left my office in a huff. But that wasn't my problem. I'm not this guy's therapist. His priority was to have someone to listen to his complaining, but that sure as hell wasn't my priority. Still though, as a people pleaser, shutting him down was hard for me to do, like very hard. However, I kept reminding myself that shutting him down was not nearly as hard as allowing this guy to continue to emotionally drain me at work and then causing me to have to be less present for my loved ones at home. And no, it wasn't sunshine and rainbows after setting the boundary. After that conversation, Sean started acting passive aggressively towards me in the office, but it was a small price to pay for me not having to consistently have to bring my work home every night because I was wasting my work time listening to this guy. Here's the key insight. Enforcement doesn't mean being rude or condescending or difficult. It means being consistent and following through on what you said you would do. Sometimes enforcement looks like calmly restating your boundary. Sometimes it means not responding to communications outside your established hours. Sometimes it means removing yourself from situations or relationships that consistently violate your boundaries. The goal isn't to punish anyone, it's to protect your priorities and maintain your self-respect. And here is the third practical takeaway of the episode. This week, I want you to practice the line framework in a low-stakes situation. Don't wait for major boundary violations to test this out. Just look for an opportunity when someone asks you to do something that conflicts with one of your priorities. Maybe it's a request to work late when you plan to exercise, or an invitation to a social event when you need to rest. Use the line framework. Listen fully. Inspect whether your boundary is being violated. Say no with grace if needed, and be prepared to enforce your decision if they push back. Practice this in small situations first so you're prepared when bigger challenges arise. Remember, boundaries are like muscles. The more you use them, the stronger they become. Okay, my friend, let's recap the 3 strategies we covered today for protecting what matters most. 1, get crystal clear on your priorities. You can't set effective boundaries if you don't know what you're protecting. Remember, your priorities are your North Star for every decision. 2, understand the different types of boundaries: time boundaries, emotional boundaries, and digital boundaries. They all work together to protect your well-being and help you show up as your best self. And finally, the 3rd strategy is to use the line framework. L is for listen, I is for inspect, N is for know, and E is for enforce. This gives you a practical roadmap for honoring your boundaries with grace and strength. As the saying goes, boundaries aren't walls that keep people out. They're the gates that let the right people in. The world needs you at your best, not burned out, resentful, and running on empty. Setting boundaries is one of the most loving things you can do for yourself and for others. It's a form of respect that says, I value my life, my health, and my relationships enough to protect them. Will it be easy? Absolutely not. Will people test their boundaries? Guaranteed. Will some people be upset with you having standards? Without a doubt. But here's what I know for sure. The temporary discomfort of setting and enforcing boundaries is nothing compared to the long-term pain of living a life where everyone else's priorities come before your own. You have limited time, limited energy, and limited attention. You get to choose how you spend these precious resources. Choose wisely, protect them fiercely, and watch how your life transforms when you start honoring what truly matters. This is your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa, and you now know that kindness can't be weak because you just experienced the strength of the Kindness Extremist Podcast. Until next time, my friend, the journey to a kinder world continues. Thank you for listening to the Kindness Extremist Podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I have one favor to ask of you. If you could kindly